My brother said, "You don't deserve any inheritance," until the lawyer read the part where I got the house. I was 22 when our grandfather died. He'd raised me after my parents' accident, but my brother Dalton had always been the favorite, or so everyone thought. Dalton got the good grades, the football scholarship, the corner office at Dad's old firm. I got community college and a job managing a coffee shop. At the reading of the will, Dalton showed up in a custom suit, already mentally redecorating Grandpa's Victorian mansion. I wore my work uniform because I had a shift right after. The lawyer, an elderly man named Mr. Pemberton, cleared his throat and began reading. To my grandson Dalton, I leave my investment portfolio, currently valued at $340,000. Dalton smirked at me across the mahogany table. Our Aunt Beatrice smiled approvingly. My Uncle Raymond nodded like this was exactly how things should be. And to my granddaughter, Mr. Pemberton continued, adjusting his glasses, I leave the house at 1847 Maple Grove, along with all its contents. The room went silent. That's a mistake, Dalton said immediately. She barely visited. I was there every Sunday. Mr. Pemberton's expression didn't change. Your grandfather was very specific. He rewrote this section 3 times to ensure clarity. This is ridiculous, Aunt Beatrice cut in. The house is worth at least $500,000. The investments should be split evenly. I sat frozen, remembering all those Sundays Dalton mentioned. The ones where he'd show up for an hour, check his phone constantly, then leave claiming work emergencies. Meanwhile, I'd spent Tuesday and Thursday evenings there after my shifts, helping Grandpa organize his books, listening to his stories, learning to make his terrible coffee exactly how he liked it. There's more, Mr. Pemberton said, pulling out a letter. Your grandfather left instructions that this be read aloud, he began. Dalton, you visited out of obligation. You never asked about my day, my health, or my life. You calculated your inheritance every time you walked through my door. But my granddaughter, she came because she wanted to. She listened. She cared. The house goes to the one who made it feel like home. Dalton's face turned red. This is garbage. She manipulated him. Probably put ideas in his head when he was senile. Your grandfather, Mr. Pemberton said coldly, had complete mental capacity. I witnessed these revisions personally over 6 months. I'm contesting this, Dalton announced, standing abruptly. You're welcome to try. Mr. Pemberton slid a thick folder across the table. But your grandfather anticipated that. He documented everything, including recordings of your visits where you explicitly discussed selling the house the moment he died. The color drained from Dalton's face. I finally found my voice. You recorded him? He recorded himself, Mr. Pemberton corrected. He wanted to ensure his wishes were honored. That's when Aunt Beatrice turned on me. If you had any decency, you'd split this properly. If Dalton had any decency, I replied quietly, he would have spent time with Grandpa because he loved him, not because he wanted something. I left that office and drove straight to the house. My house. As I unlocked the door, I noticed an envelope taped to the inside frame, my name written in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. Inside was a key and a note. Check the study. 3rd bookshelf, behind the law books. My hands trembled as I found the spot. Behind a row of dusty legal texts was a small door I'd never noticed. Inside was a wall safe. The key fit perfectly. When I opened it, my breath caught. Stacks of cash, jewelry, and dozens of leather journals. But it was the top journal that made my heart stop. The first page read, Evidence of Dalton's fraud. Begin here. I sank into Grandpa's worn leather chair and started reading. The first entry was dated 3 years ago. Grandpa's handwriting was steadier then, before the arthritis got bad. Today, Dalton asked to borrow $50,000 for a real estate investment. He showed me documents, seemed legitimate. I wrote the check, but something felt wrong about how quickly he wanted the money. I flipped through pages of dates, amounts, and Grandpa's growing suspicions. He'd hired a private investigator. The copies of bank statements were paper-clipped to the pages. Dalton hadn't invested anything. He'd been gambling, sports betting, poker games, online casinos. The $50,000 was gone in 6 weeks. But that wasn't all. Dalton returned today asking for another $30,000, said the investment hit a snag and he needed to cover closing costs. I gave it to him, but I've started keeping records of everything. Page after page documented Dalton's lies. The amounts grew larger. $75,000 for a business venture that didn't exist. $100,000 for a down payment on a property he never bought. Each time, Dalton provided fake documents, forged signatures, created elaborate stories. Over 3 years, Dalton had taken nearly $400,000 from Grandpa. The investment portfolio he'd inherited today, that was what remained after Dalton bled him dry. My phone buzzed. Dalton's name flashed across the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then another call from Aunt Beatrice, then my uncle. I silenced my phone and kept reading. Grandpa had known everything. He'd documented every lie, saved every fake document, kept copies of every check. But he'd never confronted Dalton. Instead, he'd quietly changed his will, making sure I got the house and everything in it, including the evidence that would destroy my brother's carefully constructed life. The last entry was dated 2 weeks before Grandpa died. I'm tired of fighting the cancer. The doctors say it's spreading faster than they thought, but I've made sure my girl will be taken care of. I've made sure the truth can't be hidden. Dalton thinks he's clever, but he forgot that I was a prosecutor for 30 years. I know how to build a case. Let him have the money that's left. She gets the house, she gets the truth, and she gets to decide what to do with it. I sat in that study for 3 hours, reading every word, examining every document, bank statements showing withdrawals that matched Dalton's deposits, photos the private investigator had taken of Dalton at casinos, at illegal poker rooms, at racetracks, copies of the fake business proposals he'd shown Grandpa. It was all there, a complete record of systematic fraud. When I finally stood up, my legs were numb. I gathered the most important documents and locked the safe. The journals went into my backpack. I wasn't sure yet what I'd do with them, but I knew I needed copies of everything. My phone showed 17 missed calls, 12 from Dalton, 3 from Aunt Beatrice, 2 from my uncle. There was also a text from Dalton. "We need to talk. I'm willing to buy the house from you. Name your price." I didn't respond. Instead, I walked through the house slowly, really looked at it for the first time as mine. The kitchen where Grandpa taught me to make his mother's biscuits. The living room where we'd watch old westerns on Sunday afternoons. The real Sundays. The ones Dalton never stayed for. The bedroom that had been mine during high school, after the accident, when Grandpa had taken me in while Dalton went off to college. This house held every good memory I had after losing my parents, and Grandpa had made sure I'd never lose it. But he'd also given me something else, a choice, a weapon. I could turn these journals over to the police. Dalton had committed fraud, elder abuse. He'd exploited a sick old man for hundreds of thousands of dollars. He'd go to prison, or I could keep the secret. Let him live with his guilt, if he even felt any, or I could use it as leverage. I walked back to the study and pulled out Grandpa's old laptop from the desk drawer. It took me a few tries to guess the password, but I finally got in with his wedding anniversary. There was a folder on the desktop labeled "For My Girl." Inside were scanned copies of everything in the safe, but there was also a video file. I clicked it. Grandpa's face filled the screen. He looked thin, tired, his skin that papery quality it had gotten in those final weeks. "Hi, sweetheart," he said, and my eyes immediately filled with tears. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone, and you've found what I left you." He paused, coughed, took a sip of water. "I know what you're thinking. You're wondering what to do with what you've learned. You're wondering if I wanted you to punish your brother or protect him." He leaned closer to the camera. "The truth is, I don't know what I want you to do. That's not my choice to make. But I'll tell you what I learned in 30 years as a prosecutor. Justice isn't always the same as revenge. And family, well, family is complicated." Another pause. His hand shook slightly as he adjusted his reading glasses. "Your brother is weak. He always has been. He got praised for every little thing, told he was special, given every advantage, and it made him entitled, made him think the world owed him something. When things got hard, when he made mistakes, he didn't know how to handle it. So he lied. He took shortcuts. He convinced himself he deserved whatever he could take." Grandpa's expression softened. "But you've worked for everything. You've been knocked down and gotten back up. You've never asked for anything you didn't earn. That's why you get the house. That's why you get to make this choice." He looked directly into the camera, and I felt like he could see me. "Whatever you decide, I support it. Turn him in, use it as leverage, or forgive him and move on. But know this, you don't owe him anything. You don't owe anyone anything. This is your life, your house, your choice." The video ended. I sat there for a long time, the cursor blinking on the dark screen. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from my manager at the coffee shop. "Hey, you okay? You missed your shift. First time ever. Just checking in." I'd completely forgotten about work. I texted back an apology, said there'd been a family emergency, asked if I could make it up tomorrow. Then I looked at the messages from Dalton again. The most recent one said, "I know you're mad about the will, but let's be adults about this. The house should be sold and split. It's only fair." Call me fair. The word made something hot and sharp rise in my chest. I pulled up the photos on my phone from earlier. I'd taken pictures of several journal pages, just in case. Pages where Grandpa detailed Dalton's lies, where he'd written about finding out about the gambling, about the fake business proposals, about the systematic theft. I attached one photo to a text message. The page where Grandpa had written, "Dalton took another $80,000 today. Told me it was for an investment property. The PI confirmed he lost it all at the Riverside Casino over one weekend. He doesn't know that I know. He thinks I'm just a stupid old man." I typed one sentence. "We need to talk. Tomorrow. The house. 10 a.m. I hit send before I could change my mind. His response came within seconds. "What is this?" I didn't reply. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Where did you get that?" I turned off my phone. That night, I slept in my old room. My actual old room, the one Grandpa had kept exactly as I'd left it when I moved into my cramped studio apartment downtown. My high school yearbook still on the shelf. The quilt his wife, my grandmother, who died when I was 8, had made for my 16th birthday. Posters of bands I'd loved, now embarrassingly outdated. I lay in the dark and thought about what Grandpa had said in the video. About choice. About justice versus revenge. What did I actually want? The answer surprised me. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want Dalton in prison. I wanted him to feel what I'd felt every time he looked down at me. Every time Aunt Beatrice praised his accomplishments while ignoring mine. Every time my uncle talked about Dalton's bright future while asking if I was still at that coffee place. I wanted him to understand that he wasn't special, that he wasn't owed anything, that actions had consequences. I wanted him to be afraid. I must have fallen asleep eventually because I woke to sunlight streaming through the lace curtains. It was 8:30 a.m. I had 90 minutes before Dalton arrived. I showered in the clawfoot tub, used one of the fluffy towels from the linen closet, and dressed in jeans and one of Grandpa's old flannel shirts that I found in his bedroom. It was too big, but it smelled like his cologne, like home. By 9:45, I had everything set up in the study. The journals spread across the desk. The laptop opened to the video file. Documents arranged in neat stacks. I made coffee. Not the good stuff I made at work, but Grandpa's terrible grocery store brand that he'd insisted was perfectly fine. I made it exactly how he'd taught me, too strong, with a pinch of salt to cut the bitterness. The doorbell rang at exactly 10:20 a.m. Dalton stood on the porch in another expensive suit. Behind him, I saw Aunt Beatrice and my uncle getting out of a Mercedes. "I said just you," I called through the door. "This concerns all of us," Aunt Beatrice shouted. "That house should be split among the family." "Fine," I said, and opened the door. "Everyone come in." They filed into the foyer, looking around like they owned the place. My uncle immediately started examining the crown molding, probably calculating its value. Aunt Beatrice headed for the living room, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "The study," I said. "We're meeting in the study." Dalton looked nervous. He'd seen the photo I sent. He knew I had something. When we were all in the study, I closed the door and leaned against it. "What's this about?" my uncle demanded. "We have lawyers preparing to contest the will. This house should be liquidated and Dalton stole from Grandpa," I said simply. The room went quiet. "That's insane," Aunt Beatrice said. "He would never." $396,000 over 3 years, I continued, all documented. Bank records, private investigator reports, photos, recordings, everything. I gestured to the desk. "It's all right there if you want to see it." Dalton's face had gone pale. "She's making this up. She's trying to discredit me so she can keep the house." "Am I?" I picked up one of the journals. January 18th, 3 years ago. Dalton requested $50,000 for a commercial real estate investment in the Pearl District. He showed me property listings, pro forma income statements, and a purchase agreement. I wrote him a check that afternoon. I looked at Dalton. "The Pearl District development never existed, did it? You lost that money at the Riverside Casino in one weekend. Blackjack, mostly. Some roulette." My uncle's eyes narrowed. "How would you know that?" "Because Grandpa hired an investigator. He knew something was wrong." I picked up another journal. March 3rd, same year. Dalton needed $30,000 to close on the same deal. More fake documents. Grandpa gave him the money, but he also followed him. Dalton went straight to the casino. Again. "This is ridiculous," Dalton said, but his voice cracked. "She probably forged these. She's been planning this for..." "The video," I interrupted. I turned the laptop around. Grandpa recorded himself talking about it. Dated, time-stamped. "Would you like me to play it?" Aunt Beatrice moved toward the desk. I watched her face as she picked up one of the bank statements. Then another. Then one of the PI's reports with photos of Dalton at a poker table, chips stacked in front of him. "Dalton," she said slowly. "What is this?" "It's fake. It has to be. This is your signature." My uncle was holding one of the fake business proposals. "I've seen your signature 1,000 times. This is yours." Dalton's mouth opened and closed. He looked at the door, at me blocking it, at the documents spread across the desk like evidence at a trial. "I can explain," he finally said. "Please do," I said. "Explain how you took nearly $400,000 from an old man dying of cancer. Explain how you fabricated documents and forged signatures. Explain how every Sunday visit was just another opportunity to steal from someone who loved you. He had plenty of money," Dalton burst out. "He was just sitting on it. I had debts. You had a gambling problem," I finished. "And instead of getting help, you decided to rob your dying grandfather." Aunt Beatrice sank into a chair. My uncle was reading through another journal, his face getting redder with each page. "You told us the investment portfolio was smaller because of medical expenses," my uncle said quietly. "You said he'd spent down his savings on treatments. The medical expenses were covered by insurance," I said. "Grandpa kept those records too. Medicare covered almost everything. The money disappeared because Dalton stole it." Dalton looked at each of them, panic finally setting in. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I made mistakes. I had some problems. But family protects family, right? We keep this between us. Nobody needs to know." "You mean like how you protected Grandpa?" I asked. "Like how you protected him by stealing his retirement savings while he was dying? That's different. I was going to pay him back. Once things turned around, things never turn around for addicts who don't get help," I said. "Grandpa wrote about that too. He saw you spiraling. He tried to talk to you about gambling addiction. You told him to mind his own business." I pulled out one more journal, the one from 6 months before he died. "Here, November 14th. I told Dalton I was concerned about his behavior. Asked if he needed help with a gambling problem. He became enraged, said I was senile and paranoid. Said if I ever accused him of such things again, he'd have me declared incompetent and take over my finances. He actually threatened me, his own grandfather." Aunt Beatrice made a sound like she'd been punched. "You threatened him?" she whispered. "I didn't. That's not..." Dalton was stammering now. He misunderstood. "I was just..." "There are recordings," I said softly. "Grandpa recorded that conversation too. Would you like me to play it?" Dalton lunged at the desk, trying to grab the laptop. I'd expected something like this. I stepped aside and he crashed into the chair instead. My uncle caught him by the arm. "Enough," my uncle said. His voice was cold. "Sit down, Dalton. This is insane. She's manipulating all of you. Can't you see what she's doing?" "What I see," my uncle said, "is documented evidence of elder abuse and fraud. What I see is that father knew exactly what you were doing and made sure she got the house because he trusted her, not you." He looked at me. "What do you want? To press charges?" I'd been waiting for that question. "I want to make something very clear," I said, looking directly at Dalton. "You think I manipulated Grandpa? You think I don't deserve this house? Let me tell you what I did." I walked to the window, the one that looked out over the garden where Grandpa and I had planted tomatoes every spring. I visited him twice a week, every week for 4 years. I listened to the same stories over and over because he forgot he'd already told them. I helped him sort his medications when his hands got too shaky. I drove him to appointments when you were too busy. I sat with him during chemo when he was terrified and alone. I was there. I turned back to face them. And you know what? I didn't do any of it for this house. I did it because I loved him, because he took me in when I had nobody else, because he never made me feel like I was less than my perfect brother. My voice cracked on that last word. So no, I don't think I manipulated him. I think he saw exactly who both of us were, and he made his choice. Aunt Beatrice was crying quietly. My uncle was staring at the floor. Dalton just looked angry. So what now? He said. You're going to destroy me? Send me to prison? Ruin my career? Your career? I laughed and it came out bitter. You mean the job at Dad's old firm? The one you got because Uncle Raymond made a phone call? The one where you've been coasting on the family name for 6 years? I picked up one more document from the desk. Grandpa looked into that too. Did you know you're one bad quarter away from being fired? That your billable hours are in the bottom 10%? That the partners keep you around out of respect for Dad, not because you're any good? Dalton's face went white. That's private. Nothing's private when you're stealing from someone. Grandpa wanted to know where all his money was going, so he looked into your life, and he found out that you're failing at everything. Your job, your finances, your relationships. The only thing you're successful at is lying. I sat on the edge of the desk. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. All of you. You're going to drop the will contest. You're going to stop spreading rumors that I manipulated Grandpa. And you're going to get help for your gambling addiction. And if I don't, Dalton said, then I give this to the police, and the State Bar Association, and your firm, and anyone else who might be interested in your creative bookkeeping. I let that sink in. But if you do what I'm asking, this stays between us. You get to keep your job such as it is. You get to keep pretending to be the golden child. You just don't get to keep lying about who deserves what. This is blackmail, Dalton said. No, my uncle said quietly. This is mercy, which is more than you deserve. He stood up, looking older somehow. I'm sorry, he said to me. We should have seen it, should have known, but we were so proud of him that we didn't want to look too closely. Aunt Beatrice stood too, wiping her eyes. Your grandfather was right, she said, about everything. The house should be yours. I'm sorry we made you feel otherwise. She looked at Dalton with something like disgust. Get help, Dalton, before you lose everything. They left together, leaving just Dalton and me in the study. He stared at the documents, at the evidence of his theft spread across Grandpa's desk. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat. You could have just told me, could have talked to me about it. We could have worked something out. Like you worked things out with Grandpa? I asked. Like you worked out, stealing from him every time he trusted you? He flinched. I have a problem, I know that. But I never meant to hurt him. But you did. You hurt him and you didn't care because you thought you were entitled to his money. Just like you thought you were entitled to this house. I walked to the study door and opened it. Get help, Dalton. Real help. Therapy, Gamblers Anonymous, whatever it takes. Because right now, the only reason you're not in handcuffs is because Grandpa loved you despite everything you did. He walked to the door, stopped beside me. I hate you, he said quietly. No, you don't, I replied. You hate that I know the truth. There's a difference. After he left, I locked the door and went back to the study. I carefully packed all the journals, all the documents, into a fireproof safe I found in the basement. I made copies of everything and stored them in 3 different locations. Then I called Mr. Pemberton. Miss Cole, he answered on the first ring. I was expecting your call. How did it go? They know everything. They're dropping the contest. Good. Your grandfather would be pleased. There was a pause. He left something else for you, Mr. Pemberton said. I was instructed to wait a week after the will reading before telling you. What is it? A trust fund, separate from the estate. He'd been setting it aside for years, specifically for you to go back to school if you wanted, or start a business, or whatever you dreamed of doing. My hands started shaking. How much? $80,000. It's yours. No strings attached. He just wanted you to have options. I ended the call and sat in Grandpa's chair, in my house, and cried for the first time since he died. Not sad tears, grateful ones. He'd known. He'd always known who I was and what I needed, and he'd made sure I'd be okay. That was 6 months ago. I'm sitting in the study right now writing this. The house is mine, legally and completely. Dalton got treatment. Aunt Beatrice made sure of it, threatened to cut him off entirely if he didn't. He's been clean from gambling for 4 months. We don't talk, but I heard through my uncle that he's doing better. I quit my job at the coffee shop, used some of the trust fund to take classes in restoration and preservation. Turns out I'm good at it, really good at it. I've been fixing up the house, slowly, carefully, learning as I go. I also started teaching basic home repair classes for people who want to learn. The community center lets me use their space for free. Most of my students are women, older women especially, who want to know how to fix their own homes instead of paying someone or relying on family members who might not show up. I think Grandpa would have liked that. The passing on of knowledge, the self-sufficiency. Last week I got a letter from Aunt Beatrice. She apologized again, said she'd been blind to Dalton's problems because it was easier than admitting the golden child was tarnished. She asked if she could visit sometime, bring old photos of my parents that she'd been storing. I said yes, because here's what I learned from all of this. Grandpa didn't give me the house just because I visited him. He gave it to me because he knew I'd understand what it meant, that it wasn't about money or value or investment potential. It was about having a place to belong, about having something that was mine, that nobody could take away, that I'd earned not through manipulation or theft, but through actually caring. The house was never the inheritance. The real inheritance was knowing that someone saw me, really saw me, and thought I was enough. I still make Grandpa's terrible coffee, still too strong, still with that pinch of salt. I drink it every morning in the study, sitting in his chair, looking at his books. And I finally understand what he meant when he used to say, home isn't where you live. It's where people remember your name. He remembered mine. And now, whenever someone asks me where I live, I don't give them an address. I just smile and say, I live in my grandfather's house, the one he wanted me to have. Because some things aren't about property or money or legal documents. Some things are just about love. 3 months after that conversation in the study, I was elbow deep in the kitchen renovation when I found it. Behind the old wallpaper in the pantry, there was a loose board. When I pried it away, expecting to find mouse damage or old pipes, I found a metal box instead. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, tied with string, addressed to me. None of them had been mailed. They were dated over the past 3 years, from the time Dalton started stealing until just weeks before Grandpa died. I sat on the kitchen floor, dust in my hair, and read them one by one. The first letter started, "My dear girl, if you're reading this, it means I didn't have the courage to tell you these things while I was alive. So I'm writing them down, hoping you'll find them when you need them most." He wrote about his fears, about watching Dalton spiral and not knowing how to stop it without destroying their relationship, about the guilt he felt for not seeing it sooner, about the relief he felt when I started visiting, when he realized at least one of his grandchildren still wanted to know him as a person, not as a bank account. "I was a prosecutor for 30 years, one letter read. "I put away murderers, thieves, con artists. I thought I understood human nature, but I didn't understand how good people could do bad things when they convinced themselves they deserved better. I didn't understand how easily love could be mistaken for permission to take." Another letter from about a year ago. "Today you told me about getting passed over for that promotion at the coffee shop. You didn't cry or complain, you just said you'd work harder, prove you deserved it next time. Dalton would have thrown a fit, blamed his boss, quit in dramatic fashion. You just quietly decided to be better. That's when I knew for sure you should get the house. Not because you needed it more, but because you'd appreciate it more. You'd see it as a responsibility, not just an asset." The last letter was dated 2 weeks before he died. His handwriting was barely legible, shaky from the pain medication. "I'm writing this from the hospital. They say I have days, maybe a week. I asked the nurse to bring me paper because there's one more thing I need you to know. You're going to feel guilty. When you find out what Dalton did, when you see how much he stole, you're going to wish you'd known sooner. You're going to think you could have stopped it, could have helped him before it got so bad. Don't. This wasn't your responsibility. You were just a kid when it started. And even as an adult, it wasn't your job to save your brother from himself. I was the adult. I was the grandfather. I saw what was happening, and I made choices about how to handle it. I documented everything so you'd have leverage if you needed it, but also so you'd know the truth. So you wouldn't spend your life wondering if Dalton's version of events was real. The truth is this. I loved you both. But love doesn't mean enabling. Love doesn't mean pretending everything's fine when it isn't. Love means seeing someone clearly and choosing how to respond based on who they actually are, not who you wish they'd be. Dalton is weak. That's not a judgment, just a fact. He's weak, and he needs structure and consequences, or he'll destroy himself. You're strong, not because you don't hurt or struggle, but because you keep going anyway. You don't make excuses. You don't blame others. You just do what needs to be done. That's why the house is yours, because you'll take care of it, because you'll fill it with life and love and purpose, because you understand that some things matter more than money. I'm proud of you. I was always proud of you. Even when nobody else noticed what you were doing, I noticed. I saw every kindness, every sacrifice, every moment you chose to be better than the situation required. Take care of the house. Take care of yourself. And maybe, if he ever gets his act together, help your brother understand that being family means more than sharing blood. It means showing up. It means caring. It means being there when it's hard, not just when it's convenient. I love you. I'm sorry I won't be there to see what you do with your life, but I already know it'll be something good, because that's who you are. All my love, Grandpa. I sat on that kitchen floor and cried until my throat hurt. Then I carefully folded the letters, put them back in the metal box, and placed them in the safe with all the other documents. Some things needed to be kept together. The evidence of betrayal and the evidence of love, side by side, because that's what family was. Complicated, painful, beautiful, real. I finished the kitchen renovation that weekend, painted the walls a soft yellow that made the morning light dance, installed open shelving where I could display Grandpa's old dishes, fixed the leaky faucet that had been driving him crazy for years. When I was done, I invited Aunt Beatrice over. She brought the photos she'd mentioned, albums full of pictures from before my parents died, photos of my dad as a kid, my mom on their wedding day, me as a baby being held by grandparents I barely remembered. We sat at the newly refinished kitchen table, the one Grandpa had eaten every meal at for 40 years, and she told me stories about my dad, about what Grandpa had been like as a father, about family before things got complicated. He talked about you constantly those last few months, she said, about how you reminded him of your grandmother, patient, kind, stubborn in a quiet way. She pulled out one more photo, separate from the albums. I found this in my mother's things after she died. She never showed anyone. It was a picture of Grandpa, much younger, in his prosecutor's robes. He was standing in front of the courthouse and written on the back in my grandmother's handwriting, "First day, so proud. Remember why you started." He kept that in his wallet, Aunt Beatrice said, for 30 years, because she wrote that to remind him that the law wasn't about winning cases or climbing the ladder. It was about protecting people who couldn't protect themselves, about standing up for what was right even when it was hard. She looked around the kitchen. That's why he gave you the house. You understand what it means to protect something, to stand up for what's right, to do the hard thing because it's necessary. After she left, I hung that photo in the study, right above the desk where I'd confronted Dalton. A reminder of why integrity mattered, why doing the right thing was its own reward even when nobody was watching. The next few months were busy. I finished my restoration coursework and got certified, started taking on small projects, helping elderly homeowners fix their houses, teaching workshops at the community center, consulting on historical preservation projects. Word spread. Soon I was getting calls from all over the city, people who'd been taken advantage of by contractors, people who couldn't afford proper repairs, people who just wanted to learn how to take care of their own homes. I hired help. 2 women from my workshop who'd shown real talent. We turned the detached garage behind the house into a proper workspace, built shelves for tools, installed a workbench, created a classroom area for teaching. Grandpa's house became more than just a place to live. It became a hub, a resource, a place where people learned that they were capable of more than they thought. One afternoon, about 8 months after the will reading, I was teaching a class on basic plumbing when someone knocked on the workshop door. It was Dalton. He looked different, thinner, tired, less polished than before. "Can we talk?" he asked. I told my students to practice what I'd shown them and followed him outside. We stood in the garden, where Grandpa's tomatoes were just starting to ripen. I'd planted them in the spring, following the same pattern he'd taught me. "I'm sorry," Dalton said. "I know that's not enough. I know sorry doesn't fix what I did, but I need to say it anyway." I didn't respond, just waited. I've been in therapy, real therapy, not the court-mandated stuff, and GA meetings, and I'm starting to understand how messed up I was, how messed up I still am. He looked at the house. "I was so jealous of you. My whole life I was the favorite, the golden child, the one everyone expected great things from. And I knew, deep down, that I wasn't as smart or talented or special as everyone said. I knew I was just coasting on their expectations." He kicked at the dirt with his expensive shoes. "But you never got praised for anything. You had to work for every little bit of recognition, and you were genuinely good at things. You didn't need anyone's approval. You just did what needed to be done." A pause. "I think that's why I took the money, not just because I had gambling debts, but because if I could take something from Grandpa, something he was hiding from everyone else, then maybe I was special after all. Maybe I was clever enough to get away with it." "But you didn't get away with it," I said quietly. "No, I didn't. He knew the whole time, and he let me keep doing it because he was building a case, because he wanted you to have proof, because he knew I'd contest the will." Dalton finally looked at me. I read his will again, really read it. The part where he said I calculated my inheritance every time I visited. He was right. I did. I always thought about what I'd get, how I'd spend it, whether I deserved more than my share. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you deserve to know that you were right. About everything. And because I'm trying to be better. Not for you, not for the family, for me. Because I'm tired of being the person I became." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a check. "This is $50,000. It's not the full amount I took, but it's all I have right now. I've been working extra hours, saving everything I can. I'm selling my car, downgrading my apartment, cutting every expense. It'll take me years to pay back the full amount, but I'm going to do it." He held the check out. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know that I'm trying to make it right." I looked at the check but didn't take it. "Keep it," I said. "Put it toward your therapy. Put it in savings. Use it to rebuild your life. Grandpa's money is gone. Trying to pay it back won't change what happened. But what Grandpa wanted was for you to get better, to understand why what you did was wrong, to become someone who wouldn't do it again." I gestured to the workshop, where my students were laughing at something, water spraying from a pipe connection they'd made wrong. "I don't need your money, Dalton. I have this. I have a business doing something I'm good at, something that helps people. I have a house that's mine. I have a life I built myself." I looked at him directly. "What I need from you is for you to actually change, to become someone Grandpa would have been proud of, not the person everyone expected you to be, but the person you could actually become if you stopped lying to yourself." Dalton's eyes were wet. "I don't know if I can." "Neither do I said honestly. "But you won't know unless you try." He folded the check and put it back in his pocket. "The house looks good," he said. "The garden too. Grandpa would have liked what you've done with it." "Yeah," I said. "I think he would." After he left, I stood in the garden for a long time, watching the tomatoes grow, thinking about second chances and whether people really could change. I didn't know the answer, but I knew that Grandpa had given me a choice about what to do with the truth, and I'd made my decision. I'd chosen accountability over revenge, consequences over destruction, possibility over punishment. Whether Dalton would actually change was up to him. I'd done my part. I went back to the workshop. My students had figured out the pipe connection and were celebrating. I showed them how to tighten it properly, how to check for leaks, how to be confident in their own abilities. This was my inheritance. Not just the house, but the knowledge that I could build something good from something complicated, that I could take pain and betrayal and loss and transform them into purpose, that I could choose what kind of person to be, regardless of what others expected. Grandpa had seen that in me, had believed in me, had left me not just property, but proof that I mattered, that I was capable, that I was enough exactly as I was. And that was worth more than any amount of money. That evening, after my students left, I sat on the back porch with a glass of lemonade and watched the sunset turn the sky orange and pink. The house was quiet, except for the sound of cicadas and the occasional car passing on the street. My phone buzzed. A text from the community center director. 3 more people signed up for next month's workshop. You're going to need a bigger space soon. Another text from Aunt Beatrice. Found more photos. Can I bring them by this weekend? And one from my uncle. Dalton told me about your conversation. Thank you for giving him a chance to do better. Father would be proud of you. I set the phone down and looked at the house. My house. Silhouetted against the darkening sky. Every window glowed warm and golden. Every room held a memory, a purpose, a piece of the life I was building. Grandpa had given me more than an inheritance. He'd given me permission to be myself, to value different things than what society said mattered, to measure success not in dollars or prestige but in impact and integrity and the quiet satisfaction of work well done. I'd thought the house was the gift, but the real gift was understanding that I'd already earned it long before he died. Not through manipulation or strategy, but simply by being present, by caring, by showing up. That was the lesson Dalton was still learning. That you couldn't fake love or fake integrity or fake genuine connection. That people knew the difference between someone who was there for them and someone who was there for what they could get. As the sky deepened to purple and the first stars appeared, I made a decision. Tomorrow I'd call Mr. Pemberton and ask him to draft something. Not a legal document, but a letter. One that would go with the house if anything ever happened to me. A letter explaining why the house mattered. Why keeping it in the family wasn't about money or tradition, but about understanding what it meant to have a place that accepted you completely. A place where your value wasn't contingent on success or achievement or meeting someone else's expectations. A place where you belonged simply because you were you. I'd pass that on to someone who understood it. Maybe one of my students whose eyes lit up when she successfully fixed a leaking pipe. Maybe a young woman who reminded me of myself at that age. Uncertain, overlooked, quietly capable. Maybe if he ever got his life together, to Dalton's kids, if he had them someday. So they'd know that family wasn't just about blood. It was about showing up, about caring, about being present in the hard moments, not just the easy ones. But that was future thinking. Right now, in this moment, the house was mine. The garden was mine. The workshop was mine. The life I was building was mine. And that was enough. I finished my lemonade, locked up the workshop, and went inside. The floorboards creaked in the familiar way as I walked through each room, turning off lights, checking windows, doing the nightly routine that Grandpa had done for 40 years and that I'd now taken over. When I reached the study, I paused. In the soft lamplight, I could almost see him sitting in his chair, reading one of his westerns, glasses perched on his nose. "Thank you," I whispered to the empty room, "for seeing me, for believing in me, for giving me this." I turned off the lamp and headed upstairs to my room, my real room now. Not just a childhood memory, but an actual space I inhabited as an adult. Tomorrow I'd get up early and work on the bathroom renovation. Then I'd teach an afternoon class. Then I'd have dinner with Aunt Beatrice and look at more old photos. Life would continue. Simple, purposeful, mine. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about Grandpa's last letter. About how he'd said he was proud of me. About how he'd known I'd do something good with my life. I hoped, wherever he was, he could see that I was trying. That I was taking the gift he'd given me and using it to help others. That I was living up to the trust he'd placed in me. But more than that, I hoped he knew that I'd learned the real lesson he'd been trying to teach. That inheritance wasn't about money or property or things you could hold in your hands. It was about values. About integrity. About choosing to be someone who showed up, who cared, who made the world a little bit better simply by being in it. That was the inheritance that mattered. And it was one I'd carry with me for the rest of my life. The house on Maple Grove still stands today. If you drive by, you'll see it's well-maintained, loved, lived in. You'll see the workshop and back, often with people coming and going, learning and building and discovering they're more capable than they knew. You'll see tomato plants in the summer, exactly where they've always been, growing in the same spot where an old prosecutor once taught his granddaughter that some things were worth tending carefully, season after season, year after year. You'll see a home, not just a structure, but a real home. The kind that accepts you as you are, the kind that remembers your name, and if you're very lucky, you'll understand what it took to preserve it. Not money or strategy or legal maneuvering, but something much simpler and much harder. Just showing up, just being there, just caring enough to stay. That's the story of how I got my inheritance. Not the one that was spelled out in a legal document, but the one that really mattered. The inheritance of knowing I was enough, exactly as I was, exactly as I am. And no one, not even my brother, could ever take that away.